Sometimes we just want to be understood. And sometimes we just want to see a way through chronic illness so that we can find meaning in our changed circumstances. Surprisingly for me, the person who has captured these points best, it's a 400 years old poet, John Milton, who went blind. He started writing poetry when he was 7, and as an adult knew about 10 ancient and modern languages. At the age of 41, he was appointed to a very senior and powerful position. So here he was, he had his dream job, his life was going well. Does that sort of ring a bell? But over the next 3 years, his sight went downhill. And by the time he was 44, he was completely blind. And being blind then meant there was no braille, there was no recorded information, no internet, no podcasts, no radio, and no smartphones. It was a profound change to his life. And shortly after, he wrote a poem that describes his struggles to come to terms with his blindness and find purpose in his life. And although his religious beliefs come out in the poem, we don't need to share them to relate to its universal message. So let's go through the poem. It starts with a statement of fact. Basically, he's gone blind in the prime of his life. When I consider how my light is spent ere half my days in this dark world and wide. And then we come to what I think is a perfect description of what chronic illness does. And that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless. He's talking about the pain of having something you're good at, your talent, in his case, his language ability, that you know you still have, but you can't use it because of your illness. And he just puts his finger on how it feels with the word useless. Perhaps one of the harshest words in English language. Dagger to the heart. And it's also interesting, he doesn't take it further, as we so often do, and say, because of this, I'm useless. He makes an important distinction and is setting the tone for how he's going to be kind to himself throughout the poem. And then the poem moves on to talk about his struggle to find a meaningful life. Though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker and present my true account, lest he, returning chide. He's worried that his Maker, which is God, is going to come and tell him off for not being productive, that he's not measuring up. And although he expresses this in religious terms, it's similar to today where we put pressure on ourselves to contribute, and we also experience pressure from others to contribute. We tend to think that we fall short of our values, whether they're religious or not, and of society's values. But it's if you're not productive, you're not achieving your life's purpose. But now Milton starts to query this point of view. He describes a dialogue, how he talks to himself about the question. Doth God exact day labour light denied, I fondly ask? And here the word fondly surprisingly means foolishly. So he's telling himself he's really an idiot for even asking himself whether God expects him to be productive when he can't be. And now we start his answer to himself. But patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. And he's describing how it's patience allows him to come to terms with his situation. And it resonates today when I read this. And I immediately get images of all the many doctors' waiting rooms I've been in. But of course we need patience, not just for the medical system, but also for all the just getting through chronic illness. And here in this part, he's also talking to himself in a very gentle tone, which is rather different to our tendency to beat ourselves up with the shoulds. I should have, I shouldn't have, I should be able to. It's a lovely example of helpful self-talk. So what is his answer? God does not need either man's work or his own gifts, who best bear his mild yoke. They serve him best. Which introduces the idea that it's enough to live the life you have with a patient acceptance rather than fighting against it and focusing on what you can't do. This idea is further developed. His state is kingly, thousands at his bidding speed, and post o'er land and ocean without rest. Where he is so well describing all these people running around and doing things. These lines well describe our modern life with smartphones and deadlines and packed schedules and give us a real feel for this whole business of trying to be more and more productive. And then we have this glorious last line which sums up how he comes to terms with his lack of practical contribution. They also serve who only stand and wait. Where he's basically saying, look, there's quite enough people running around being productive. There's a purpose in just being and living your life as you can. Being patient with your difficulties and the limitations of your illness. It's okay. You're okay. And this is the message of the poem. This is a universal idea that stands up whether or not it has the religious belief behind it. If you read the whole poem out loud, and I've put the words in the description, you will have the experience of the energy and the tumult of the poem leading up to the quietness and peace of the last line. It is the calm after the pain and chaos of grief, the struggle to work out what to do. It's a feeling of being able to relax when you get to the end. You don't need to do more. Because he was so open about his personal struggle, he's saying, look, this is difficult, it's tough, it's normal to struggle. I think it's a lovely thing to see. I think it normalises it for us when sometimes it seems that everybody's just solving all their problems and moving on. This poem is something I like to keep for difficult days, partly because of the feeling of being understood. Obviously, I never met him, but somehow he knows how I feel. It's like a validation or a sharing. But I also like how he talks about his personal struggle to make sense of his situation and the resolution that he comes to, that you don't need to struggle, that you're okay living your life. And with that perspective, there's peace. I think this is really important in our society, which pushes being productive to a level far more than we actually need to survive. I also like how gentle he is towards himself. But this poem is not the end of his story. At the age of 56, that's 12 years after he went completely blind, he published his greatest piece of poetry called Paradise Lost. It was a religious epic, an epic it really was. It's 10,000 lines and about 80,000 words, which is the average length of a PhD thesis. What's remarkable is how he achieved this. He apparently at night would compose one or two verses and remember them, and then the next morning someone would come by and write them down for him. And he did this day in, day out for many years. And somehow during all of this, he's kept track of it. It's very inspiring to see that having come to terms with his blindness, his resourcefulness allowed him to find a way to keep making poetry and to live the life he wanted to in some way. I'm now going to read the full poem so that you get a sense of the power of the last line. And I put a link in the description to a reading on YouTube. When I consider how my light is spent ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker and present my true account, lest he returning chide. Doth God exact day labour light denied? I fondly ask, but patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts, who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousands at his bidding speed, and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. Please comment and subscribe if you found this useful, and please click on my latest upload. Thank you.